Hi, welcome to Make Sense of Math. I am Michelle and I am so glad you are here. Today we're going to talk about how to reduce the amount that you have to reteach in your middle school math classroom. My first and I think maybe second years of teaching, I was doing so much reteaching that I didn't even get to all the curriculum. I just like reteaching, and then I realized, if I could just teach it better the first time, I wouldn't have to do so much reteaching. So today I want to talk about 5 strategies that I have found to be useful when I taught school to help reduce reteaching. So the first one is to teach with models first. Teach conceptually, so teach concretely first. That could be using algebra tiles, it could be using the number lines, it could be like base 10 blocks, it could be using integer chips. But when you're teaching, I always want to teach concretely first, because math can get really abstract with all the symbols, and you've got to teach if you teach concretely first, the abstract's going to come eventually. So the first one is to always use math, like the manipulatives and the models first. The second one is to make connections to real life, and I always did this in the form of word problems. If it was anything like you when you went to school, when I went to school, like would you have the textbook, and like the first maybe like 1 to 20 problems were all fluency, and then there would be like some word problems, and when my teacher would assign questions, she would be like, okay, 1 through 20 or 1 through 10 or whatever, and then do like these 2 word problems. And so since I did things like numerically, I'd always do the fluency problems first, and then I get to the word problems and I'd have like no idea what was going on. So I'd either like stumble through them or spend forever on them or skip them. But my suggestion is, when you are teaching a new topic, to present the word problems first. You'll be amazed at the way that students can think through things and like figure out the answer, even though they don't know the maybe the mathematical algorithms or the processes behind it. They can figure it out a lot of the times, and it's impressive to see how they do that. And so as you build up their understanding of the problem going on, then you'll be able to go backwards and work on fluency. But I always work on word problems and connection to real life first, because they'll be able to figure it out, and then they'll have like a base to build on for their fluency. Okay, number 3 is to encourage mathematical discussion. I do this from day 1 in my classroom. I teach them how to use mathematical language and have a mathematical discussion. I have words on my wall that say like, I disagree with you because, or I agree with you because, and just like prompts to help them learn how to have mathematical discussion. And we do these as a big class. We learn how to do it as a big class. We learn how to do it in small groups and in pairs and in writing. And so they can always justify their work. And I don't know, they just start sounding like mathematicians at the end of the year, and I just love it. So number 3 is to encourage mathematical discussion. Number 4 is to teach it multiple representations. So if, for example, you're teaching functions, make sure you're teaching it, and this is in the curriculum, so you probably are anyways, but just as an example, with the tables, the graphs, the equations represent the situations, and you are connecting them all. Or if you're teaching equations, you can show how it doesn't necessarily matter which way you put the variable on. You're just showing it different ways, and how they all connect. So teach it multiple ways. And another thing with that is that it helps their connections, but it also, students will often connect with a way to solve it best for them. They will understand it best one way. So if you give them multiple representations of different ways to represent it or show it or solve it, then they can choose which one's best for them. And they can also check their work doing it a different way. Okay, so that's number 4. And number 5 is error analysis and productive struggle. That's 2, but I'm going to clump it into 1. Error analysis is one of the strategies that I use throughout all the year. And we talk about at the beginning of the year how errors are just a way for us to grow and to learn. And that's how we understand math. And so one strategy that I do is I always, first and foremost, is to protect the student. So when I get a whole bunch of papers, I will go through them and mark common errors that I see, and then I'll pick out a couple of different type of errors, and then I always cut the name off. And I had what was it? I had an Apple TV in my room, I believe. But if you have any way to display a paper so it's big on the board, or you could even just rewrite the problem how they did it on the board, and to show their work. If you're directly showing the paper, I always made sure not to show it to a class that student was in, even though their name was cut off. They know it's theirs and they might feel a little bit embarrassed. Some may may not, but so I'd always show it to a class where that student's not in it. But if you just want to recopy their mistake on the board as well, I think that's also effective. I really like showing work so that students can learn. So error analysis, and then we talk about the problem and discuss it as a class, and we would do this like weekly. It doesn't have to be a huge chunk of your time at school and class. It could just be like 5 minutes at the beginning or 5 minutes at the end of class. And with productive struggle, like you've got to teach your students grit. You've got to teach them that that's how they're going to be successful, is not giving up, is that they can learn this, they're going to struggle through it, and they're going to try again, and they're eventually going to get it. So those are my 5 suggestions to minimize reteaching in your classroom. Number 1, teach concretely first. Let me just add on to that is that teaching concretely first, like it can take a lot of time. And I never move on to like the representational or abstract until they understand the concrete. And it can take up a lot of time. And at first when I started teaching this way, I thought, man, like I am not gonna have time to teach all this other content because I've taken so long to just teaching concretely on this. And this happens a lot with algebra tiles. But I noticed as I did that, like it minimized my reteaching so much that I did have enough time, number 1. And number 2, the students had such a good conceptual understanding of the concept that I knew that it was going to be easy for them to like build on it in future years. And so don't worry about the time. If you're doing it right, it's going to minimize the reteaching. So it's going to work out. Okay. So number 1, teach concretely first. Number 2, make connections to real life. I do that in the form of word problems first. Number 3, encourage mathematical discussions. Number 4, teach multiple ways, multiple representations. And number 5, error analysis and productive struggle in your classroom. Thanks for joining me today. Have a good one.